Welcome back to Retail War Games. Today's guest is Jay Davis, CEO of PillowCube.
Oh, Jay, I'm glad we get to spend time together again.
Me too.
I love Jay.
I'm excited to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Great to meet
Yeah.
you.
This is so fun. Okay, we got to get some story out of you, though.
Okay.
You've got so much history, so many companies you've started, you've been a part of, product companies, service-based companies. Where did it all begin?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would say probably I think I'm somewhat unique in that, like, a lot of entrepreneurs kind of talk about how they were like entrepreneurs as kids. I really wasn't. I was not the kid selling candy in high school. That was like one of my good friends. And I was like, why would you do that? So I don't know. That like wasn't kind of win, but I would say it was really, I went on a mission for the LDS Church to Brazil, and I became friends on a mission with a lot of like Jewish Masons, and they were always entrepreneurs. And so I just like would hang out with these guys and get to know them, and it was always interesting because they were like, oh, like I own the supermarket and the paper store and like 40 apartment buildings and this and this.
Oh
and
my
I was
gosh.
like, that's awesome. And they just were very like kind of like these little mini empires. So that's
Wait, where
that's
were you
where
in
it really-
Brazil? I did
South
not
of
meet.
Brazil.
I was in Porto Alegre.
Are you serious? I was
What?
Santa Maria.
Dude,
Crazy.
That's pretty cool.
No wonder we
you
get
guys.
along.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
meant to be.
Yeah.
What? The Masons? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of where, and then I came back from my mission and went to BYU, and yeah, just got into the business school and was kind of deciding between like strategy and entrepreneurship, and decided to do entrepreneurship, and it stuck.
That's pretty
So-
cool.
What was the
Yeah.
first business, though, that you got started?
So the first business was I started a business while in college with some friends, and I don't even know that it ever made money. And then,
But it
and
was fun,
like-
and
but
you
it was
learned
great.
some
what
things.
counts.
Yeah. And we were building something, and we tried to sell it to some people, and no one, people were interested and never paid us, and we're like, I don't know. And that was good. It was good to like, we went and like knocked doors of businesses and like pitched them, and then I started
That's a hustle.
doing iPhone games and made some money doing iPhone games.
You developed iPhone games.
I didn't develop. I would kind of come up with the concept, work with developers, designers, kind of manage the whole process, and like actually sold some games, which was great. It was fun to see like, okay, this works.
Oh my gosh.
And then from there, I got married and we had our first daughter. And then I was like, okay, I need a job. So luckily I was able to find a job in 2009 at Vivint doing product development.
No way.
And that was great. So I got
Yeah.
to see, I think that was good because like, I think when I started, Vivint was probably like 100 million, probably a couple thousand employees, or not a couple hundred employees. Not that big. And then it just like went crazy. Like, and that was back
Skyrocketed.
when it was
Yeah.
Apex,
Oh yeah.
and then it was APX, and then it was Vivint. And so it was amazing to see, like, I was brand new first job, but I got to see like all these amazing leaders and entrepreneurs like kind of show what it was like to build a really, really massive company. So
Wow.
that was great. And then from there I left and joined a little startup called The Color Run and helped blow that up, and
Oh my
then it
gosh.
just kind of went from there.
I didn't know that part of your history.
Yeah. So Color Run was wild. I think he launched it, the founder, Travis, launched it in November, I think, of 2011. I joined it in December. My mission trainer was the first employee. There were just like 3 of us in a room, 3 employees in a room, and then the founder. And it was insane. Like we went from, hopefully this will work, to like, couldn't open events fast enough, and just went crazy. We ended up doing, I think, 600,000 people the first year we did it, paid for it.
My
Wow.
gosh.
And how many runs was that year?
I think that was like, I think it was around, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to like do the math. I think it was 60 events.
That's
And
wild.
at the like time we were like, maybe we'll do a couple this year. And then it just went bonkers. Like
Yeah.
we did a bunch of viral videos. That's how I got into video. And then me and one of the guys from Color Run started a YouTube channel that was super great, and learned a ton of stuff from that. So, yeah.
You were one of the OG YouTubers.
Oh yeah. I mean that original Color Run video that we did came out kind of right that year was Dollar Shave Club. We did Color Run, and Harmon Brothers did Poopery. So like it was kind of like I was talking to those guys and like what are you guys seeing? It was interesting. It was a wild. I mean, that was back when Facebook, A, you didn't have native video on Facebook, and B, you couldn't pay money for Facebook ads.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
Facebook ads didn't exist.
You're right.
You could boost a post. That was it.
Wow.
And then that year was the year, 2012 was the year that they made it so not every post was seen by every one of your friends or every one of your likes. Because back then followers were called likes.
Oh, that's
And
right.
so, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy times. So it was just like seeing stuff change so quickly.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting.
That is great. And then after Color Run,
After
you guys ended up
Color
selling
Run,
it?
so he got some offers. He never sold it. I think he sold off some of the equity that he had. He actually sadly passed away this year. This year or last year.
Oh my gosh, young.
Yeah.
Wow.
Died of cancer,
heartbreaking.
unfortunately. So really sad.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it was just like, we couldn't hire people fast enough. It was insane. We were opening events. We'd sell out 30,000 tickets that were like $60 a piece in, 30 minutes.
It's fun for sure.
Yeah, it was a wild
fun.
time. That was that whole, and then I kind of got like, I was doing YouTube videos with Scott and we were doing stuff. And then I was also getting kind of like, I'd advise or consult with like event companies because they'd call me up and be like, dude, how did you do that? And I realized after doing a bunch more that it was like, oh, that was a very singular experience.
Very unique.
Like that is
Yeah.
Magic in a bottle.
Oh, it was
Yeah.
so many things kind of hitting at the exact right. Like that when we first started, every single post you posted as a business, every one of your likes saw. So we had like 1 million likes in 3 months. And so it was just like, we were hardly spent, like the ROAS was probably like 10,000.
Yeah.
Like it was
You hardly
just
spent anything.
nuts. So yeah, it was very wild, but it was, figuring out how to do that. So it was kind of a good going from Vivint that was more established. It was kind of in that phase of like, I was going to say, I think they went from like 100 to 400 while I was there, which is bonkers in 4 years. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so incredible. Maybe even more. But then Color Run was very different. It was like, when I first started, we'd done like 20 grand in revenue, maybe
Yeah.
50, and went from that to like 100 million.
Oh my
So
gosh.
IMG offered to buy it pretty early on, and crazy stuff.
Oh
So
my
that was
gosh.
my introduction to hypergrowth startup.
And so you decided to leave to do your own thing.
Yeah, so I left and did YouTube videos, and then also was consulting with other event companies. So, and then from there, I was like consulting, doing different projects, and then eventually I was working actually at Start Studio. So I joined Start Studio to kind of get back into more the, I would say like traditional startups. Events are crazy. Like I kind of hit that point where I was like, I can't do events anymore. So I wanted to get more into the tech scene, and so I joined Start Studio and met a bunch of Clint, met Josh Falk, who I still work with, and then in 2017 I started Creatively. So that was kind of
Tell
the
everybody what
process.
Creatively is, because this goes along with your videos and virality and
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah, so Creatively is a marketing and performance agency. Ad agency, we build ads for people, really focused on creating something that tells the story and sells the product. So someone can see that kind of really top of funnel and like, oh, I've never heard of this. Now I know what they do and I know why I should buy it or why I would be interested in it. We do some unique things to kind of filter people out in the first part of the video, so you get to your core audience, and then from there, you can really kind of know, whether someone wants it or not. So yeah, that's been. We have great clients. We're working on a project right now with True Classic, tons of other startups. I'm like now somewhat distant from Creatively. We're still in the same building, but I've hired a CEO there. And so it's fun to kind of see that continue to grow and scale, even though I'm not there day to day. But it's been super fun. And then in 2018, as we were starting to see success, I was like, I really want to start our own brands. And so I started Pillow Cube in-house and then spun it out. So, yeah, that was just...
And now welcome Pillow Cube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this
Yeah.
is amazing. Okay, so you've got this Creatively that's doing advertising, marketing, video, strategy, ads. And you decide, well, why don't I just create a few products and use this machine to help us market it? I'm assuming you used your own team at Creatively to help market it?
Yep. Yeah,
'Cause
that
you
was
already
the
had
whole
an
idea.
expertise there.
Yep. Yeah. So the whole idea was like, okay, we keep doing this for other people, and we keep seeing it work. What products or really it kind of started more as products. Like, is there a product we could blow up?
Right.
Well,
Well, that's my question: is why Pillow Cube? Where did the Pillow Cube idea come from? Right?
Yeah.
Where'd that? Yeah.
So growing up, I grew up in Chicago until I was 10, and then when I was 10, I moved to Colorado. And in Colorado, I was friends with a guy, or a kid, not a guy, another person my age, who was Japanese, and his family talked about kind of Japanese pillows. I was at a sleepover one time, and his family all used, different Asian pillows, and that kind of stuck in my head. And then in college, I had a friend who had like an IKEA couch. It was like the first one I saw that had like a really flat armrest. And I loved taking naps on that. I'm like, this is so great. I never, I was always like scrunching up my shoulder, putting my arm under the pillow. I was just always frustrated. Pillows were never thick enough or solid enough to like be a comfortable side sleeper. And so we had a bunch of mattress companies that were pitching us, and they would all send us like these little samples of their foam that they had on their mattress. And I took 2 pieces of foam and put them together and laid on my couch in my office and was like, that's kind of the idea I've always had. Like my friend growing up, it was an aha moment. My friend growing up, the IKEA couch, and I like spray glued that together, hired a seamstress to make like a cover. And I just like started showing it to people, and people were always like, that's the dumbest idea. But then when they would try it, they really liked it.
Yeah.
And then I made like 25 of them, like 25, and I gave them to friends and family, and like no one would give them back after they started using them. And it wouldn't always be the person I gave it to. It'd be like, well, I didn't like it because I'm a back sleeper, but like my son won't give it back to me. And so that was like kind of my initial test to know that like, okay, no one will give that pillow back. Like that's a pretty good sign.
Yeah.
But I think that's still the biggest hurdle for us is like people see it. Like a lot of women see it and they're like, I don't really want that on my bed. But then they try it and they're like, that's amazing.
It has
that's
to stay
so
there.
comfortable.
Yeah.
So, but it's been an interesting that it was just a total kind of random series of events. But then as we started getting them out to people were like, these are really comfortable. It's a much better way of sleeping.
So what did that transition look like? Pillow Cube is created, right? You're so excited. You're getting all this hype. Everybody's loving it. They can't live without it. What'd you do next?
Yeah, so there were kind of 2 things. We did that original like cube.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like a square. And then we launched a second version. So that was like, we launched that summer of 2019, started shipping it in December. And then in April of 2020, we launched like a wider version. And that's when like things really took off. But I was still day-to-day at Creatively. And that first year we had no employees. So like everyone at the agency was just like kind of pitching in an hour or 2 a week. Yeah. Like, oh, I'll do customer service. I'll do this. And so we actually had done $4 million before anyone worked at Pillow Cube.
Oh my gosh.
So
because it was like, all just like extra help from
literally zero employees. So we had like no one working there. And it was just like, oh, this is great. It's a really cool side hustle.
And this makes me wonder, how many units is that? Like how many units did you create before you even had a team?
I think it was probably, what would that be, like 40,000 units?
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, so we were just selling, and it was like, oh, cool, like that's working, it seems like. And it was really like, it kind of ramped up that year. Like 2020, it was like, and I still remember like, oh my gosh, we're doing $100,000 a month and $300,000 a month. And then we did $1 million in November. And it was like, okay, like this is something that like I should pay more attention to. And really, so that's kind of when I started saying, okay, the other partners that I'd brought on at Creatively, I kind of told them like, you guys are going to be taking more of the Creatively workload, and I'm going to focus more on Pillow Cube. And so 2021 was really when I started to like, okay, I'm really focused on Pillow Cube.
Tired of spending $30,000, $50,000, or even $100,000 on trade show booths? Try Volcanic Retail, a cost-effective solution to reach key industry players without the hefty price tag. Brands can now access an exclusive introductory offer available only to podcast listeners. For just $279 a month, you'll gain access to hundreds of thousands of retail buyers, contact details for over 10,000 top influencers by retail channel, and the opportunity to pitch your products to over 70,000 retail locations. Head over to volcanicretail.com today to sign up.
And it's been mostly direct to consumer.
Yeah.
And you obviously got your marketing magic. I love your branding.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's awesome. Your messaging
Thanks.
is on point. I am the worst at that stuff. I honestly need so much help. So now that you've got the branding out there, have you entered into the retail space?
Yeah, so we're starting to kind of dip our toes in it, and we launched with Walmart in Q4 of last year, and we're launching some new products with them this year, which is great. Our kids' pillow is launching with them. We have kind of like our core pillow and our knee pillow, and then we're launching our cooling pillow with them this year. Maybe one other product. So have three new products so far. But I think that's a big transition for D2C brands. Is like, how do you transition? It's a different world. We know that kind of like Facebook, YouTube, Shopify, 3PL process very well. Or at least we hope we do. But then you go to retail, it's like very different. Like even the language, the verbiage is different.
Well, and I would love to ask too, why Walmart to begin with? Did they approach you? Did you approach them? How did that go?
Yeah, so I think that there were a couple things. We have talked to a lot of the different retailers, and are still talking with them. But the buyer at Walmart just like really loved the product. And as we looked at like where we thought PillowQ was heading, I think PillowQ, we have higher end products as well, and we're working on launching those in some of the other big box retailers. But like our core product, we really feel is like, okay, this is a kind of mass, really fits in that mass group. Most people should be able to afford it. It's like in that range. And so we just felt like Walmart was a really great partner. I think one of the things we really liked is they're very consistent. Mm-hmm. Like they give you data constantly. They make orders frequently. Like it's not like not usually like huge gambles where you're like, okay, we got to order 400,000 SKU or units, and hopefully it sells. Yeah. And so we've seen good sell through, and we've been able to really hit it there. So yeah, I think they're really great. They've done a really good job also of. I think they're aware of some of the perceptions that people have of working with them, and they've done a good job of avoiding those. Of like, we're going to steal your product, or we're going to try and push you to go super cheap. It's funny how many times the Walmart buyer has been like, "Guys, that's too cheap. Like, I don't want to sell stuff that price." Or like, let's do a doorbuster for Thanksgiving, and he'll be like, "I don't think that's your brand. Like, let's avoid that." So they've been awesome. I think that, and it's been interesting too. Like Walmart has kind of shifted up, I would say, and kind of the dollar stores and the, some of those have kind of stepped into where Walmart once was. So that they have I can't remember the stat, but it's like 90% of Americans shop at Walmart every month. So at least once.
It's probably very accurate.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I bet some of our listeners would love to know, how was the vendor doc process for getting into Walmart? What did that look like for you guys? How time consuming was that? What did that look like for you guys?
I will be honest, and I did none of it.
Okay.
I'm the creative.
Yeah.
I'm not good at paperwork. So, no, I think it's been, I think there's definitely, they've been really helpful as we've gone through that process, because we had like some people in-house who had done Walmart before. We had one guy who used to be a buyer there for a little bit. And so that was helpful, but it's still like, even as we do new things, like, I've been surprised how great they've been at like, let us explain what that means. Because there's a lot of like terminology and acronyms. Absolutely. And like, wait, what's FP again, or FC? Like, oh, okay. What's this mean? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it also means different things for different retailers. And so, but no, it's been good. Like I think the technology piece is obviously something they've worked on, and so it makes it easy to like load your SKUs in and your products in, and so I think it's been good. But I think that is one of the questions like that we're going through and kind of debating is, should we work with like a broker? Even with where we're at, we're looking at like, how do we speed up? How do we go faster? Because there are just some of those relationships that it's hard to replicate overnight. So.
Right. Well, and I think as a brand, it's that battle, right, that you always play of like rep group, broker, like trade shows. Where does my budget go? How do I make those decisions? And how do I spend my revenue and the ROI I do get from those retailers, you know, in the best way? What's your guys' internal dialogue for that as a brand?
I think probably like we've kind of started more from the strategic standpoint of like, I think one of the hardest shifts, and this is why you sometimes see kind of the D2C brands, and then on the other side you see the groups who just do retail. One of the hardest shifts is your customer goes from being the end user to being not the end user, but they're still your customer. I mean, they are a customer of PillowCube. They are buying product from us. They just resell it to the end user. And so that's interesting because you have to treat them. It's hard to sometimes remember, like they're your customer. You treat them like your customer. So we're kind of debating that in-house of, is that something that we want to become really like a core competency, or do we want to just go find people who already know how to do that and already have that strength and kind of work with them? So it's an ongoing development.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but I think that we've met some really great brokers and some really great rep groups that have just great relationships, or even like they're in Bentonville or they're in Minneapolis, and so it's kind of hard to beat that closeness of someone who's there all the time. We've gone down to Bentonville, and it's wild. I mean, it is like the whole city is Walmart. I mean, you just everywhere you drive, you're like, oh, there's another office building that is Walmart. I mean, it's the whole city is their campus. Kind of, it feels like. So it's crazy.
I have a random question.
Yeah.
So PillowCube, a lot of brands, when they're trying to break into retail, don't know what the best process looks like.
Yeah.
I would love to know how you guys did the sampling with buyers. Like, especially with a product like yours, you're saying you have to try it and then you can't live without it.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what that looks like for a brand internally too.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that we've always kind of had an approach, especially with like influencers, of just a very heavy seeding program of like, let's seed it with a lot of people, get a lot of people excited. Even with influencers, we usually send them one because we want to know, hey, before we like pay for a post or even think about working together, if you don't really love the product, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So we've tried to take that approach with the Walmart buyers and other buyers. We've usually met them at trade shows. The bedding world has very specific trade shows. It's very, very important in that world. And so we'd always try and like, hey, let us get you some product if they are allowed to take it. And just try and get them trying stuff so that they can see. But that's honestly been a big challenge. Like we've had some retailers we've gone into. There was a bedding store retailer that has like 30 locations, and the buyer just like hated it. He was like, I freaking hate that pillow.
So you
and
just
that's hard.
Till they turn over.
Yeah. You're like, okay, well, hopefully that guy either gets fired
Or moves on.
on.
Yeah, just next buyer, please.
And that's hard.
So when you're talking about influencers, how have you looked at the finances and said, okay, selling through retail is at X margin, selling with influencers is similar because of the discount and commission?
Yeah.
How do you kind of compare from a financial standpoint those two? Is it very similar, just the way you look at it from a margin standpoint?
Yeah, I think that we've traditionally tried to just find more usually with influencers, we'd kind of like seed a product with them. If they loved it, they would usually post about it organically. And then from there, we would kind of see like, hey, that posted really well. That's probably someone we should pay. And then I think it does make sense. But that's that's the hardest thing about e-com is the margins. I mean, it's just you're constantly focused on. So I think that's something that we had some good advisors who had really great industry experience, and from day one, they were like, hey, you have to be planning for retail eventually, and your margins have to fit this model. Like, here's how much you can spend on your COGS and getting it to them, and then it needs to be here in order, like wholesale price has to be here so that retail can be here so that you ever make money. Because we've seen a lot of people who they go into retail and it's like they've pigeonholed themselves into like, oh, we can't really make money at this. So I think like for us, we try and say like wholesale, we want our COGS to be like 40%, 35% of wholesale. Because otherwise it's just like you get fees. I mean, it's not like you get 50% of retail and that 50% then gets cut back because you have returns and exchanges and processing fees and other stuff. And so you have to have enough room there. So
do a lot of other companies forget about these additional costs, returns?
Yeah.
Or they do, because I'm assuming they get upside down pretty quick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And like sometimes huge brands that we've talked to are like, don't worry, you'll make it up in volume. And you're like, no, you won't. Like, it really won't. If you're losing $1 every SKU you sell, you don't make that up in volume. Like, you lose hundreds of millions of dollars. And so that's like something that's really hard. And that's also, every meeting with Walmart, they always quote Sam Walton, like, give me your best price. I'm like, okay, that was it. But
I said it once.
That's what you got to play. Yeah.
Interesting.
So one of the things that we've been doing that's been helpful is like price testing, so that we can go and say like, hey, this is the optimal retail price. Like, we know that. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things in consumer is just everyone kind of uses different methodologies, but none of them are great, Like a lot of people are like, oh, you just 4x COGS. And you're like, it's not always like the ideal, or 5x or 6x or 10x or whatever it is. So we've been trying to get deeper into like building real pricing models of like what's optimal price.
It's a really hard thing to do as any brand, right? Figuring out that margin so that you're not hit even harder. It's so hard to be a brand. And so I would love to even just ask you, for D2C brands who have those wish list retailers who are so excited and want to be in a Walmart, want to be in wherever those retailers would be.
Yeah.
At what point, you've done it successfully, can you say, okay, we're ready? What would you say to them?
That's a good question. I don't know that we were fully ready. So I think that's part of it is like, I think probably one of the lessons I've learned is it's a lot longer of a process than you think to get in. And then once you're in, you've just started.
Right.
Like we were talking, and COVID kind of messed that up because COVID made it so that most of the buyers weren't going to the shows like they usually were. So it made it harder for us to interact. I was even talking to someone, Eric Childs, if you guys know Eric. He's like, been doing retail for a good amount of time and just is totally an expert. And he was even saying, he's like, dude, back before COVID, it was so much easier. Like, you don't even realize that, like, how much of a difference that's made because you just can't interact personally. This year was the first time we went and met with a lot of buyers in person. We saw them at shows once COVID kind of died down, but like, I think that's a huge add or advantage that people have. But I would say, so we were seeing them, we were talking to them, and it still took a lot of time. And COVID kind of slowed that down. But I think that's definitely something we've seen and talked to other brands is consistent. Is it takes a long time. Like I think we all view it as you go to Bentonville, you go into this room, you pitch them once, and then there's like a yay or a nay, and then you're like, no, never talk to me again. It's like, nah, I don't know, maybe. And sometimes it's kind of usually either a maybe or a yes if you have great products. And so I think that's one thing is like keep going. It's going to take time. You want to get to know them. You want to build a relationship. And then the other realization is like once you're in, it's like just started. Like that's when you're like sell through and fulfillment. And are you doing a good job on fulfillment? Are you being a good partner? Are you merchandising the right way? Are they merchandising how you want them to? It's an ongoing process. So I think start early. Like don't see it as it's not Shark Tank. You're not pitching one time. So
Pinners Conference is back and better than ever. October 24th through the 26th at the Mountain America Expo Center. Explore the full shopping floor with more than 600 trending vendors while learning and creating in classes about DIY, cooking, beauty, home decor, self-improvement, and so much more. Use the promo code WARS for $5 off your tickets at pinnersconference.com.
If somebody was listening, they're trying to start a product company, what advice would you give these new entrepreneurs who are trying to get products out in the market, whether it's D2C or they're trying to go retail, but just product companies in general?
Yeah, so I think like some of my big lessons, one is I always tell people to do that test that I did of giving people product and then asking for it back. I think that's a good test to see how much people like it. We do it at Creatively. When people pitch Creatively and want us to help them market their products, we usually ask them for a bunch of samples, and then we just put them out at a desk. We have like a desk in the kitchen, and we just put like free products, and everyone knows that they can take stuff that's on there. And it's always very telling when like things don't move. It's like, okay, it's free, and no one's touching it. And that's not all. Like a lot of our clients are so far ahead. It's like you've proven there's a market for what you have. But I think that's a good test. Like early days, when we are talking to a younger company, that's always one of our first things is like, do people like the product? Do they use it? Do they continue to use it? So that's kind of my first thing that I always start with is like, make sure you actually have something. And then from there, price testing, like where should you be at? Right. I think.
How do you do that? How do you price test?
Oh man,
just trial and error. Do you just put it out there? Because that's
you
scary.
can do that. So there's IntelliGems, which if you have a Shopify site, you can do A/B testing on different prices. We're getting a little more into like, calculus and hiring kind of pricing experts who go and do studies and surveys and find customers, non-customers. So there's some great resources out there, but like a lot of times it is, just go ask people, survey people and be like, hey, what would you pay? What would you be willing to pay? The people you gave it to who don't want to give it back, be like, okay, you don't want to give it back. How much would you be willing to pay to keep it? Because that's like kind of flips the usual mentality of like, how much would you give me to take it with you? But once they like kind of sold on it, asking them like, how much would you be willing to pay to not have to give it back?
I love that answer.
And so I think that kind of like flips it a little bit. But those are the big things. It's as a consumer person, you have to be you can either be brutal up front or you're going to spend a bunch of money on product and then no one's going to buy it and it's going to be brutal on the back end. And so I try and be very like, one of the things I do when I talk to people who've bought it, I always ask like, hey, what do you not like about it? Because it kind of opens up to like
more discussion.
Give me some critique first and then tell me what you like. But like, tell me what you didn't like first. Or is there a part of the process? It is. You got to be really brutal because I think where consumer is different from a lot of other types of startups is like it's all about scale. Like you need to sell millions of people on buying your product every year to become a large consumer brand. And so that's where it's very difficult. If you're a person who doesn't like feedback, it's going to be rough. Consumer is difficult.
Well, and that feedback is invaluable as a brand, right? Like if you have one little thing that you can tweak and make your product even more exceptional, why not do that? Yeah. So I have a question. And I'm just trying to think with all of your nuggets from Creatively too. How would you pitch from D2C to B2B? What would change in that pitch creatively? Like what would you recommend for those brands who are trying to break in? What would change in that pitch?
Yeah, I think a couple things that we've learned is be true to your brand. So sometimes we've had like people who've been reps or sales groups and sometimes, like I said, the Walmart buyer will be like, I don't think that's a good idea for Pillow Cube. Like, I don't think that fits their brand. So be really like confident. I think price testing does help because the buyers are going to come in. We've had people come in and be like, I think that should be $7. And you're like, yeah, there's like,
where'd that come from?
That's less than what we're paying for it. And we're buying it at massive volume or pretty good volume. So no, no, you cannot sell that product for $7. So having good pricing data of like, look, we've tested, this is the optimal price. This is where people want to be. So I think that's really helpful. I think you do have to be aware of kind of there is a slight shift again, because they're your customer, but not necessarily the end user, they might be an end user. They have different goals. Like the D2C customer's end goal is that you solve whatever problem that they want to solve. And Walmart has a different goal. Like their goal is to increase volume, increase sales, or other things. Like one of the reasons they really liked PillowCube and were excited about PillowCube is because of the amount of brand awareness we had, the number of people who had visited our website. So that was like a lot more exciting for them. And that fits some of the challenges they were trying to solve for. So I think you have to shift that. Like just going in and being like, people love the product. It's like, well, it's a lot more trying to match. And so I think that's also, I think it's really good when you go in and say, hey, we're not a match for, dollar store. Like PillowCube's not a good match. We are a mass pillow, but we're on the higher end. We're more expensive. We're never going to be close to $1. So that's just not our thing, or $5 or whatever it is. So it's identifying like who are their end users and can we make their end users happy? Because that's another big piece of it. Walmart wants happy customers and people getting a value. So, yeah.
I really appreciate that because I think you being strategic with how you present to those buyers too, they're really going to appreciate that, right? As a brand and being aware of their end consumer, not just like you want to be in that store. It's your wish, it's your dream, but really making a point to make those wish list retailers know that they're on your list.
Yeah. When we first started talking to Walmart, our main pillow was 120 and they were just like, yeah, that's, not going to work for us. That's way too high. Like our most expensive pillows are in the 50 to 70 range. And so we just took that like, okay, that's good feedback. And then we called them, we kept meetings, send them updates. Hey, we have this new product or we have this thing. And then we sent them an email or called them and we're like, hey, we're actually shifting. We redid our supply chain. Now that COVID has died down, we are shifting our supply chain so we can bring the price down a lot, and we're going to take that main pillow down to 70. And that's when they were like, oh, okay, that like fits. And I think that's another thing for product companies. You have to recognize there's going to be things, and it's actually good. There's going to be like products you want to sell into Walmart that you will not sell into Target, that you will not sell into Costco, that you will not sell into, for us, like the mattress firms of the world or the bedding stores, because they all have different kind of like profiles of here's what people are spending on a pillow or whatever it is, makeup. So, if you're a higher end makeup, you probably don't want to go to Walmart. It's probably more like Sephora and Ulta and some of those. And you have to be willing to, I think the buyers are always sensitive and you're like, well, if we get in Walmart, we'll make tons of money. It's like that's not their only goal. They want to provide value to their end users and have something that fits. So you got to really think through it. So
interesting. And how have you done this with your family, with kids? How many kids do you have?
4 girls.
4 girls. That's amazing.
Yeah.
How have you been
awesome.
able to do all of this with the family
and
stay as balanced as possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's never easy. I think that's always a challenge. But I think like one of the things I've definitely learned through this whole process is the importance of hiring processes, of like really like every single opening having a process that you go through. So I think in the early days it was much more, and I think this is very true of most startups, so it's not bad, but it's very like, oh, I know this guy who does that, let's just bring him in. And as PillowCube and other businesses creatively, I've seen this, it's usually best when it's like, you might still end up hiring that person, but going through that process of like, we always post jobs, even when it's internal. Like even when we're going to like, hey, the person I think I want to hire for that position is an internal person. It's like, we still post a job opening. We wait till we get a certain number of applicants. Then we whittle it down to a certain number of people. We do in-person interviews for that number of people, which is usually we try and do 10. Like 10 to 15 people were actually either in person or on the phone, so like a Zoom call, so we can actually get to know them. And then you're whittling that down to 3 to 5. And for the 3 to 5, you're bringing them into the office, even if we have to fly them out, meeting people. And I think that one thing has just like increased the level of talent we're getting. You still meet people who you're like, oh my gosh, that person might be perfect. The guy you introduced today.
There you go.
It's so great. But you still, it's like, we're still going to do a job post,
Yeah.
and we're going to have a job opening, and we're going to get applications. And so I think that's like really important, because as you do that, it takes off the load. Like, I think as a founder, you have to be willing to hire people who are much better at that job than you.
Yeah.
And it makes you so much happier. So that's always been, I love having people who I'm like, man, I don't know anything about this. Like I said, the paperwork, like, I don't know how to do that, and I'm not good at it. And so I'm going to find someone who's great at it and just do
Hire it
that.
out.
So, yeah.
Focus on what you know best. That's
Yes.
awesome.
Yep.
Jay, this is fun. It's so good to be able to hear the story and the history and how it relates. Hopefully everybody that's listening can kind of relate some of these stories to what they're building or how they've done this whole thing with retail. Do you have any other last question? I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, just a thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed, and I'm excited to go get a pillow cube.
Oh, well,
I really am excited to go try one. I'm a
I
side
love mine.
sleeper. Okay.
I totally love it.
Maximize your sales team's potential with Volcanic Retail University. Our courses cover everything from foundational retail knowledge to advanced strategies for established brands. Go to university.volcanicretail.io and use code RWG for 30% off.